The massive ships appeared on a quiet Tuesday morning. They came without warning, their dark metal hulls blocking the sun over every major city on Earth. The world held its breath, waiting for either destruction or salvation. Hansol Park stood at the window of the United Council building, her dark eyes fixed on the largest ship hovering over Seoul. At 32, she was the youngest chief diplomat Earth had ever appointed. Some said she was too young for such responsibility. Today would prove them either right or wrong. "They're requesting to speak with our leaders," Do-won Kim said from behind her. He held a tablet showing multiple incoming signals from the alien ships. "They call themselves the Stellar Empire." Hansol smoothed down her simple blue suit. "What's their tone?" "Demanding. Almost. Bored." Do-won played the message. A female voice filled the room, speaking perfect English, but with a strange musical quality. "Lesser species of the third planet, your system now falls under the protection of the Stellar Empire. Prepare your leaders for immediate surrender proceedings." Hansol raised an eyebrow. "They don't waste time, do they?" She turned to face the room full of nervous officials. "Have they shown any hostile actions?" "No weapons activated," Jae-ho Lee reported from his military console. He looked up at Hansol with poorly hidden concern. "But their ships could destroy our major cities in minutes." Hansol walked to the central communication panel. "Then let's surprise them." She pressed the broadcast button. "This is Chief Diplomat Hansol Park of Earth's United Council. We welcome the Stellar Empire to our system and request a peaceful diplomatic meeting to discuss future relations between our peoples." The silence that followed felt heavy. Do-won checked his instruments. They received the message. "They're laughing." A new voice came through, younger than the first, but filled with authority. "How amusing. I am Princess Era of the Stellar Empire. You suggest diplomatic talks as if we were equals." The princess's tone dripped with amusement. "Perhaps I should humor you. It might prove entertaining." Hansol kept her voice calm and professional. "We would be honored to show you humanity's achievements and discuss how both our peoples could benefit from peaceful cooperation." "Achievements?" Princess Era laughed again. "Your species hasn't even colonized your own moon properly. What could you possibly offer the Stellar Empire?" "Sometimes the greatest treasures come in unexpected forms, Your Highness," Hansol replied. "We may surprise you." There was a long pause. The officials in the room barely dared to breathe. "Very well, Diplomat Hansol Park," Princess Era finally said. "You have caught my interest. You may board our flagship in 2 hours. Coordinates will follow. Come alone." The transmission ended. "Alone? That's too dangerous." Jae-ho stepped forward, his military training showing in his stiff posture. "Let me send at least one security team with you." Hansol shook her head. "No, this is a test. They want to see if we'll trust them, and if we're worth their time." She turned to Do-won. "Get me everything we have on their ship designs. I need to know what I'm walking into." "The council needs to vote on this," an older official protested. "We can't just let you." "We don't have time," Hansol cut him off. "Their ships are over our cities. This isn't about following procedures anymore. It's about showing them humanity isn't what they expect." Do-won handed her a small earpiece. "At least take this. We'll monitor everything." Hansol put the earpiece in and gave him a small smile. "Have some faith. Humans have survived worse than dealing with one spoiled princess." As she left the room to prepare, she heard Jae-ho mutter, "That's what worries me. They don't know what humans are capable of when pushed." 2 hours later, Hansol stood on the roof of the United Council building. A beam of light shot down from the massive ship above, surrounding her in a golden glow. As she felt herself being lifted off the ground, she remembered her grandmother's words. "Sometimes the smallest person can change the largest empire if they have the courage to try." The light carried her up toward the alien ship, toward what could be either humanity's greatest diplomatic triumph or its last attempt at independence. Either way, Han Sol Park was ready to show Princess Era exactly what human courage looked like. The golden light set Han Sol down gently in a vast hall made of shimmering metal. The ceiling rose so high she could barely see it. Guards in silvery armor stood along the walls, their faces hidden behind masks that looked like starlit skies. "Welcome to the Imperial flag vessel, lesser being," a tall figure announced. His voice echoed through the hall. "I am Royal Announcer Min Ki. You will follow proper court protocol or be removed." Han Sol bowed exactly 45 degrees, not too low to seem weak, not too high to seem disrespectful. "Thank you for your welcome. I look forward to learning your protocols." Min Ki seemed surprised by her calm response. He handed her a thin tablet. "These are the 500 rules of Imperial court behavior. You have 10 minutes to memorize them before meeting Princess Era." Han Sol took the tablet with a smile. 10 minutes will be enough." The announcer's eyes widened. No lesser species has ever. "Rule 1. Never interrupt a royal announcer," Han Sol said, already reading. "Rule 2. Always walk 3 steps behind any royal family member." Rule 3. Never make direct eye contact for more than 2 seconds. She looked up. "Would you like me to continue?" Min Ki's mouth opened and closed without sound. Finally, he said, "Perhaps we should proceed directly to the throne room." The walk through the ship amazed Han Sol. Walls changed color as they passed, showing scenes from different worlds. The floor seemed to float on starlight, but she kept her face calm, remembering Du Wan's advice through her earpiece. "Don't show too much wonder. They expect us to be overwhelmed." The throne room doors were twice as tall as Earth's largest trees. They opened without a sound. Inside, Princess Era sat on a floating crystal throne, surrounded by what looked like small stars. Han Sol followed every rule perfectly, 3 steps behind Min Ki, eyes lowered but not completely down. Stop exactly 7 meters from the throne. Right knee bent slightly more than the left. "You surprise me, human," Princess Era said. She looked young, maybe in her 20s by human standards. Her skin had a slight purple tint, and her hair seemed to move like waves in water. Most species take weeks to learn even basic court manners. "Humanity has many cultures and protocols of our own, Your Highness," Han Sol replied. "We understand the importance of respect." "Respect," Era floated down from her throne. "Or fear." "With all respect, Your Highness, fear would have made us surrender immediately. Instead, we chose to talk." A murmur ran through the watching court members. No one spoke to the princess this directly. Era walked around Han Sol, studying her. "You wear such simple clothes. No decorations, no symbols of power. In human diplomacy, our words and actions carry more weight than our appearance. Yet you followed our protocols perfectly." Era stopped in front of her. "Why?" "Because this is your home, and we are guests." Han Sol met the princess's eyes for exactly 2 seconds. "Just as we hope you will respect our ways when you visit Earth." The court fell silent. No one had ever assumed the princess would visit a lesser planet. To everyone's shock, Era laughed. "Clever. You slipped that invitation in so naturally." She waved her hand, and the floating stars rearranged themselves. "Tell me, what do you think of our ship?" "It's impressive," Han Sol said honestly, "though I noticed the quantum stabilizers in your engine room could be more efficient." Another shocked silence. "How could you possibly know about our engines?" Era demanded. "The slight vibration in the floor every 3.2 seconds. On Earth, we solved that problem in our smaller ships last year." Han Sol kept her voice humble. "We would be happy to share the solution, as a gesture of friendship." Era stared at her for a long moment. Then she did something that made the entire court gasp. She walked over and linked her arm with Han Sol's. "Come," the princess said. "We will discuss this friendship over dinner. And you will tell me more about these humans who notice things they shouldn't possibly understand." As they walked out together, Han Sol heard Min Ki whisper to another court member, Send word to the Queen. The humans, they're not what we expected. Through her earpiece, Du-Wan's voice came quietly. Well done. But be careful. You've got their attention now. For better or worse. Han Sol just smiled. Phase 1 of showing the stellar empire humanity's true worth was complete. Now came the hard part. Turning curiosity into respect. The dinner with Princess Era went better than anyone expected. Han Sol sat at a table made of what looked like flowing water, trying Earth foods that the ship's computers had recreated. She had just finished explaining Earth's music to the fascinated princess when she noticed something wrong. One of the servants wasn't moving like the others. His steps were too careful, too measured. Han Sol had seen that walk before, in Earth's military training videos about assassins. The food here is amazing, Han Sol said calmly, while her eyes tracked the servant's movement. But maybe we should move to see the garden you mentioned, Your Highness. Princess Era shook her head. After dessert, the chef has prepared something special. The fake servant moved. A silver blade appeared in his hand, flying straight at the princess's head. Han Sol didn't think. She grabbed the heavy metal plate in front of her and threw it like a disc. It hit the knife in midair, sending both objects crashing to the floor. Before anyone could react, she jumped over the table, grabbed a pitcher of water, and threw its contents on the floor. The assassin slipped on the wet surface just as he pulled out a second weapon. Han Sol used his own momentum against him, just like she had learned in her Earth defense classes. She grabbed his arm, twisted, and brought him down hard. Guards, she shouted, keeping the attacker pinned. Check his right pocket. There's probably the sonic disruptor. The head guard finished, pulling out a small device. How did you know? Simple logic. Knife first to make us think he was out of weapons. Second knife as backup. The real weapon would be hidden for a final try. Han Sol pressed her knee more firmly into the assassin's back as he struggled. That's how I would plan it, if I were an assassin. Princess Era stood frozen by her chair. You saved my life. Just doing my job, Your Highness. On Earth, diplomats are trained to protect as well as talk. Han Sol looked up at the guards. You might want to check the kitchen staff. He had to get that uniform somewhere. The next hour was chaos. Guards found 3 more conspirators in the kitchen. The assassin turned out to be part of a group called the Pure Stars, who hated the idea of peace with lesser species. Han Sol sat in a small meeting room, holding a cup of something hot that smelled like mint. Princess Era paced in front of her. I don't understand, the princess said for the 3rd time. You could have let him kill me. Your people would be free of our empire. That's not how humans work, Han Sol replied. We want peace, not victory through murder. Besides, she smiled. I started to like you. Era stopped pacing. You are nothing like what we expected humans to be. Few things ever are what we expect. Han Sol set down her cup. That's why talking is better than assuming. Through her earpiece, Du-Wan spoke quietly. The council is impressed, but they're worried this attack means bigger problems. Before Han Sol could respond, Queen Neri swept into the room. Her hair looked like a galaxy swirling around her head, and her eyes fixed on Han Sol with an unreadable expression. So, the Queen said, this is the human who saved my daughter. Han Sol stood and bowed perfectly. I only did what anyone would do, Your Majesty. No. The Queen's voice was sharp. No one else did. My own guards were too slow. My courtiers too shocked. Only you, a human, moved to save her. She turned to Era. Perhaps we have underestimated these people. Mother, Era said, I want to see Earth, to understand them better. Han Sol kept her face calm, but her heart beat faster. This was more than she had hoped for. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. Go, learn about these humans, but be careful. She looked at Han Sol. They are clearly more dangerous than they appear. After the Queen left, Era turned to Han Sol with excitement. When can we leave? Tomorrow, Hansol suggested. That will give us time to arrange everything. And give Earth time to prepare, she thought. Through the earpiece, Do-One sounded worried. This is moving very fast. Be careful, Hansol. But Hansol wasn't worried. Today had proved that humans and the Stellar Empire could work together. Even if some people didn't like it, she would make this peace work. She didn't notice the dark look that crossed Queen Neri's face as she left, or the quick message the Queen sent to her private guards. The game was just beginning, and not everyone wanted it to end in peace. Princess Era's first step onto Earth soil happened at sunrise. She stood in Seoul's biggest park, watching the morning light paint the sky pink and orange. Her eyes were wide with wonder. "Your sun, it's so warm," she said, lifting her face to the light. "And your air smells different from our ships. Like life." Hansol finished. "Earth has millions of different plants and animals. They all add to what you're smelling." Do-One stood nearby, checking his tablet. "We have a full day planned, Your Highness. Would you like to start with the forest recovery zone?" The princess nodded, still looking around with curiosity. Her guard captain, a tall figure named Yun-Ho, stayed close behind her. He kept one hand on his weapon, nervous about being on an alien planet. Their first stop was what used to be a dead forest. 10 years ago, pollution had killed all the trees. Now it was green again, full of new life. "How did you fix it?" Era asked, touching a tree trunk gently. "We made mistakes," Hansol explained. "Big ones, but instead of giving up, we worked to fix them. Humans are good at learning from our errors." They walked through the forest. Birds sang above them, and small animals watched from the branches. Era's face showed more emotion with each step. "We thought humans were destroying their world," she said quietly. "Our reports said your planet was dying." "It was," Do-One said. "But that's the thing about humans. We don't give up easily." Next, they visited a city rebuilt after a massive earthquake. Modern buildings stood next to traditional temples. Street vendors sold food, and children played in parks built on what used to be broken ground. "Your people lost everything here?" Era asked, watching a group of kids flying kites. "Many did," Hansol said. "But look what they built from the ruins. Humans are stronger together. When disaster strikes, we help each other." They ate lunch at a small restaurant. The owner, an old woman, didn't even blink at serving an alien princess. She just brought out extra dishes, explaining each one with pride. "Try the kimchi," Hansol suggested. "It's something unique to Earth." Era took a bite and her eyes lit up. "This is amazing. How do you make it?" The restaurant owner spent the next hour teaching the princess about fermentation. Era took notes on her royal tablet, completely focused. In the afternoon, they visited a school. Children crowded around Era, asking questions and showing her their projects. One little girl gave her a drawing of a purple princess standing with Earth children. "They're not afraid of me," Era said, holding the drawing carefully. "Children often see truth more clearly than adults," Hansol replied. "They see you as a person, not just an alien." Their last stop was the United Council building at sunset. From the roof, they could see the whole city lit up below them. Era's ship still floated above, but it didn't seem as threatening now. "I understand now," Era said suddenly. "Understand what?" Hansol asked. "Why you didn't surrender. Your people have faced so much, natural disasters, pollution, wars, but you always rebuild. You always find a way forward." She turned to Hansol. "We thought we were being kind, offering to rule you. But you don't need rulers. You need allies." Through Hansol's earpiece, Do-One whispered, "She's getting it. But remember, not everyone in her empire will agree." Hansol nodded slightly. She knew there would be problems ahead. But right now, watching Era learn about humanity, she felt hope. "Tomorrow we can show you more," she offered. "There's a music festival, and..." Her words were cut off by an urgent beep from Do-One's tablet. His face went pale as he read the message. Han Sol, he said, his voice tense. We just lost contact with the lunar colonies. All of them. At the same time. Era's guard captain touched his communicator. Princess, we're getting strange readings from the royal fleet. Ships are moving without orders. Han Sol and Era looked at each other. In that moment, they both knew. Their work toward peace was about to be tested. The real challenge was just beginning. Han Sol ran through the United Council building's emergency center, her footsteps echoing in the dark halls. The power had gone out 10 minutes ago. Only red emergency lights lit the way. Show me the lunar colonies again, she ordered, entering the control room. Do-One typed quickly on his backup systems, bringing up grainy images on the screen. All communication is still down, he reported, but our emergency satellites show Imperial ships near each colony. Princess Era stood by the window, her face troubled. Those ships shouldn't be there. I gave no orders. Because they're not your orders, Jaiho said, bursting into the room. The military attache's uniform was wrinkled, like he'd been working all night. We just decoded this message. It's from your mother's private channel. He handed a tablet to Han Sol. She read it quickly, her face growing pale. What is it? Era asked. What did my mother do? Han Sol looked at the princess with sad eyes. She ordered the fleet to take control of the lunar colonies. By force, if needed. No, Era shook her head. She wouldn't. We were making progress. You showed me your world, your people. That's exactly why she did it, Han Sol said softly. Look at the message timing. She sent these orders right after you said humans would make better allies than subjects. The room went quiet. On the screens, they could see Imperial ships surrounding each lunar colony. 10,000 human lives hung in the balance. How many ships? Jaiho asked. 5 near each colony, Do-One answered. Small ones, but powerful enough to break the dome shields. Han Sol walked to a large map of the moon. The colonies can't fight back. They're research stations and mining operations. We never armed them because we wanted to keep space peaceful. Through her earpiece, she heard the council president speaking urgently. Find a solution, Han Sol. We can't lose those colonies. Era touched the screen showing her mother's message. This can't be happening. She's my mother. She's supposed to be wise, to want peace. Sometimes, Han Sol said gently, the people we love can still make terrible choices. Suddenly, alarms blared through the building. Do-One's fingers flew over his keyboard. Imperial ships just appeared in Earth orbit, he reported. A lot of them. Full invasion fleet, Jaiho confirmed grimly. They were hiding behind Mars. Waiting. Han Sol looked at Princess Era, who seemed lost and small despite her royal bearing. She had to make a choice. Trust the princess with Earth's secrets, or try to handle this alone. Era, she said softly, using the princess's name without titles for the first time. I need to know, are you with us? What? Earth isn't as helpless as your mother thinks. We have ways to fight back. But if I show you, if I trust you with this knowledge, I need to know you're on humanity's side. Era stood straighter, her eyes clearing. My mother is wrong. What she's doing, it goes against everything our empire should stand for, everything I learned about honor from you. She took off her royal crown and placed it on the table. I stand with Earth. Han Sol nodded and turned to Jaiho. Activate the Aegis protocol. Jaiho's eyes widened. Are you sure? The council will understand. Do it. He pressed his hand to a hidden scanner. A new screen appeared, showing a network of satellites no one had ever seen before. What are those? Era asked. Humanity's insurance policy, Han Sol explained. Hidden defense satellites. We built them in secret, hoping we'd never need them. They can disable ships without destroying them. You had these all along, Era whispered. You could have fought back at any time. Fighting is easy, Hansol said. Peace is harder, and worth trying for. She turned to do one. Send warning messages to all Imperial ships. Tell them to withdraw or face defensive measures. Wait, Era said. She picked up her crown and stood tall. Let me send the message. As Princess of the Stellar Empire, I order them to stand down. Through the earpiece, Hansol heard the council president. Can we trust her? Looking at Era's determined face, Hansol knew her answer. Sometimes the biggest victories came not from weapons, but from trust. Send your message, Your Highness, she said. Let's show your mother that humans and the Stellar Empire can write a new story together. As Era began speaking to the fleet, Hansol prayed they had made the right choice. The next few minutes would decide the fate of two civilizations. Princess Era's message echoed through space. This is your crown princess. Stand down immediately. Any attack on Earth or its colonies will be seen as an act against the royal throne. The control room was silent. Everyone watched the screens showing the Imperial ships. None of them moved. They received the message, Do One reported, but they're not responding. Hansol stood next to Era, watching the ships. They're waiting for something. As if answering her words, a new voice filled the room. Queen Neri's face appeared on the main screen, her eyes cold with anger. My daughter, she said, what do you think you're doing? Era stepped forward. The right thing, mother. You taught me that a ruler must be wise and just. There is no wisdom or justice in attacking peaceful colonies. You are young, the queen said. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Era's voice grew stronger. I've walked on Earth. I've seen their cities, their schools, their children. These humans don't need our rule. They need our friendship. The queen's face hardened. You've been corrupted by their influence. Captain Yunho. Era's guard captain stepped forward, his hand moving to his weapon. But instead of acting against Era, he stood beside her. I stand with the princess, my queen, he said firmly. I too have seen Earth's worth. Queen Neri's eyes narrowed. So be it. You leave me no choice. She looked at someone off-screen. Begin the attack. Mother, no, Era cried. Hansol turned to Jio. Activate the Aegis satellites. Target their weapons only. The hidden satellites came to life. Beams of blue light shot out, hitting the Imperial ships. Their weapon systems went dark. Impossible. The queen gasped. How dare you? We didn't want to show our strength, Hansol said calmly. We wanted peace, but we've always been ready to defend ourselves. Through her earpiece, Do One reported, more ships are coming out of hyperspace, at least 30 of them. Hansol looked at Era. The princess stood straight, tears in her eyes, but determination on her face. Mother, Era said, please stop this. Earth has shown me something wonderful. People can change, grow, become better. Even empires can change. Empires must be strong, the queen insisted. No, Era replied. Empires must be wise. Hansol and her people taught me that. Real strength isn't about having the biggest fleet or the most weapons. It's about knowing when to offer friendship instead of force. The queen was quiet for a long moment. In space, the new ships held their position, weapons ready but not firing. You choose them over your own empire, the queen finally asked. I choose a better future for our empire, Era answered. One where we have allies, not subjects. Partners, not slaves. Hansol stepped forward. Your Majesty, Earth offers friendship freely. We can share our technology, our culture, our knowledge. Together, we could build something greater than either of us could create alone. The queen looked at her daughter's face, then at the disabled ships floating harmlessly in space. You planned this, didn't you, human? You turned my daughter against me. No, mother, Era said softly. Hansol showed me truth. You taught me to recognize truth when I see it. Remember. Something flickered in the queen's eyes, a memory, perhaps, of teaching a young princess about wisdom and honor. Through the earpiece, Jaiho whispered, "The new ships are powering down their weapons." Hansol held her breath. This was the moment that would decide everything. Queen Neri looked at her daughter for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Perhaps I have forgotten some of my own lessons about wisdom." Era's face lit up with hope. "Then you'll stop the attack." "I will consider your words," the Queen said carefully. "All ships, stand down. Return to holding positions." The relief in the room was physical. People let out breaths they hadn't known they were holding. But Hansol wasn't completely relaxed. She saw something in the Queen's eyes, a calculation, a hidden thought. This wasn't over yet. "Thank you, Mother," Era said. The Queen's image disappeared from the screen. Era turned to Hansol, her eyes shining. "We did it," she said. Hansol smiled, but inside she was worried. Sometimes the hardest part wasn't winning the battle, it was keeping the peace afterward. 3 days after the Queen's retreat, the Stellar Empire split in two. Hansol watched the reports coming in on the main screen of the United Council's war room. Half the Imperial fleet had declared loyalty to Princess Era. The other half stayed with Queen Neri. "Another noble house has sided with us," Du-1 reported, marking a new sector on the star map green. House Sun-Mei controls 3 major trading routes. Era sat at the conference table, her face tired but determined. "Mother will see this as proof she was right. She'll say Earth's influence is tearing the Empire apart." "The Empire was already divided," Hansol said gently. "This just brought it into the open." Jaiho entered the room quickly, his military uniform neat despite the late hour. "We have a problem. Queen Neri's forces are gathering near the Stellar Gate network." "The gates." Era stood up, worried. "Those control all faster than light travel in this sector. If she takes them, she can cut off Earth from its allies," Hansol finished, "and stop any houses that support you from reaching us." Through her earpiece, the council president spoke urgently. "We can't let that happen. Everything we've built with our new allies depends on those gates." Hansol looked at the star map. Earth had made many friends in the past few days. 7 noble houses had pledged support to Era's vision of peace. 3 alien species had signed trade agreements. But all of that would mean nothing if they couldn't reach each other. "Your Highness," Captain Yunho called from his post. "Message from Admiral Sunme. Her ships are ready to help defend the gates, but they need a royal command." Era walked to the map. Her hand traced the lines connecting different stars. "If I give this order, there's no going back. It will mean open war with my mother." Hansol stood beside her. "Whatever you decide, Earth stands with you." Era looked at her with grateful eyes. "You've never pushed me to fight my mother. Even now, you let me choose." "Because that's what real allies do," Hansol said. "They support each other's choices." Suddenly, all the screens went dark. When they came back on, Queen Neri's face filled them all. "My foolish daughter," she said. "See what your human friends have done. Brother fights brother. Ships turn against their own fleet." "You did this, Mother," Era replied firmly, "by choosing force over friendship, by refusing to see that times must change." "Change?" The Queen laughed coldly. "I'll show you change. In 1 hour, I will take control of all stellar gates. Any ship that resists will be destroyed. Choose now, your mother and your duty, or these humans who filled your head with dreams." The transmission cut off. The room was quiet except for the beeping of computers. 1 hour, Jaiho said softly. "Not much time to gather our forces." Era stood straight, looking more like a queen than a princess. "Captain Yunho, send word to Admiral Sunme. The Crown Princess orders all loyal ships to defend the gates." She turned to Hansol. "Will Earth's ships join us?" "Always," Hansol promised. She turned to Jaiho. "Launch everything we have, and activate all Aegis satellites near the gates." Do-1's fingers flew over his keyboard. Messages going out now. 8 noble houses responding. No 9. House Min just declared for Princess Era. Through her earpiece, Han Sol heard the council president. The whole galaxy is watching. This will either be the end of everything we've worked for, or the beginning of something new. Han Sol watched ships moving on the star map. Green for Era's forces, red for the Queen's. In 1 hour, they would meet in battle. But this wasn't just about who had more ships. It was about two different futures, one of control and fear, one of friendship and growth. Do one, she said quietly. Send one last message to all ships. Tell them this isn't about choosing sides between a queen and a princess. It's about choosing what kind of empire they want to be part of. Era took Han Sol's hand. Together, she asked. Han Sol squeezed her hand. Together. Above them, ships moved through space, carrying the hopes of two civilizations. In 1 hour, the future would be decided. But whatever happened, humans and their allies would face it as one. The hour passed too quickly. Han Sol stood in the war room, watching hundreds of ships gather near the stellar gates. The massive space structures glowed blue against the darkness, each one big enough to let whole fleets jump between stars. Queen's forces approaching, Do One reported. 40 capital ships, over 200 smaller ones. Our numbers? Han Sol asked. 35 capital ships, 180 smaller ones. He paused. But we have the Aegis systems and better positions near the gates. Princess Era studied the tactical display. Mother's ships are forming attack groups. Classic Imperial assault pattern. Then she's planning a direct attack, Jaiho said. No tricks, no subtle moves. Han Sol shook her head. No, that's too simple. Your mother's smarter than that. Through her earpiece, she heard urgent voices as Earth's ships moved into position. Captain Yunho coordinated with Admiral Sunmi's fleet, placing ships to protect each gate. All ships in position, Do One said. Queen's fleet will be in range in 5 minutes. Era touched the image of her mother's flagship. She's being too obvious. Han Sol is right. She's planning something. Han Sol walked around the tactical display, thinking. Do One, show me the power readings from the gates. Numbers appeared next to each gate. Han Sol's eyes widened. There, she pointed. Gate 7's power is higher than the others. Why? Running scan. Do One typed quickly. There's another fleet hiding in the gate's energy field. They're masking their signals in the power readings. Mother's trap, Era whispered. She knew we'd focus on her main fleet. Han Sol grabbed the command microphone. All ships near Gate 7. Pull back now. Enemy fleet emerging. But it was too late. 100 ships burst from Gate 7's energy field, right behind their defense line. Queen Neri's voice filled all channels. Surrender now, daughter. Your position is lost. Era gripped the tactical table. Our ships are caught between two fleets. Han Sol looked at the display, her mind racing. Then she smiled. No, she said. Her ships are. She turned to Jaiho. Activate all Aegis satellites, but don't target their weapons. She looked at Era. Trust me. Era nodded without hesitation. Aegis satellites activating, Jaiho reported. Targeting their engines. The gates need exact calculations to work, Han Sol explained quickly. If we disable their engines, they'll drift. The gate energy fields will pull them in random directions, creating chaos in their perfect formation. Era understood. But our ships will be affected too. Not if they know it's coming. Han Sol opened the command channel. All allied ships, cut engines on my mark. Let the gate fields pull you. Use maneuvering thrusters only. Through her earpiece, Admiral Sunmi spoke. A bold plan, Diplomat Park. The Queen won't expect it. 3 minutes to weapon range, Do One reported. Han Sol took a deep breath. Send one last message to the Queen's forces. Tell them they can still join us. Remind them what we're fighting for. Era took the microphone. This is your princess. We offer peace, cooperation, a chance to build something better. Choose now. The next 3 minutes felt like years. They watched as ships moved closer and closer. Enemy fleet in range, Jaiho said. Aegis satellites ready. Hansol looked at Ara, who nodded. All allied ships, cut main engines, Hansol ordered. Aegis satellites, fire. Blue beams struck the Queen's ships. Their engines died. Without power, they started drifting in the gate's energy fields. Some spun helplessly. Others crashed into each other. 15 enemy ships switching sides. Do-1 reported excitedly. Their transponders are changing to green. 30 more, Juho added. They're powering down voluntarily. Queen Neri's voice came again, but this time it shook with rage. What have you done? Show them a better way, Era replied. Like Earth showed me. The battle wasn't over. Many ships still fought, but more and more turned their transponders green, choosing Era's vision of the future over the Queen's. Hansol watched the tactical display, hope rising in her chest. Sometimes the best victories came not from destroying your enemy, but from showing them a better path. Mother, Era said softly into the calm, please, it's not too late to change. The Queen's answer would decide the fate of the Empire. Hansol held her breath, waiting. 1 month after the Battle of the Gates, Hansol stood in the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace. The room sparkled with light from 1,000 floating crystals. Representatives from 50 worlds filled the space, all waiting for the ceremony to begin. Nervous? Do-1 asked, adjusting his formal Earth uniform. A little, Hansol admitted. Everything changes today. Jaiho stood nearby, watching the crowds with careful eyes. Even now, after peace was won, he took his duty seriously. Good changes, he said. Changes we fought for. The great doors opened. Queen Neri entered first. She looked older than before, but her head was still high. After the battle, she had surrendered not to force, but to truth. Her own words still echoed in everyone's memory. I fought to preserve our empire's strength. Now I see that real strength comes from growing, not staying the same. Behind the Queen came Princess Era. She wore simple royal robes, more like Earth clothes than imperial fashion. She had changed too, grown stronger and wiser. Her eyes found Hansol in a crowd, and she smiled. All rise, the royal announcer called. The succession ceremony begins. Queen Neri stood before her throne. Her voice carried through the hall. I, Queen Neri of the Stellar Empire, choose to step down. Not in defeat, but in hope for our future. My daughter has shown me a better path. She took off her crown. The crystal and metal circle glowed in her hands. Era, my daughter, you challenged me not with weapons, but with wisdom. You showed me that an empire can be strong and kind at the same time. She turned to look at Hansol. You learned this from Earth. Now we all will learn it. Era knelt before her mother. The Queen placed the crown on her head. Rise, Queen Neri said softly. Rise as Queen Era, first ruler of the new Stellar Alliance. The hall erupted in cheers. Era stood, the crown glowing on her head. But instead of sitting on the throne, she walked to where Hansol stood. Hansol Park, she said formally. Earth's diplomat. My friend. She smiled. The one who showed me true courage. Hansol bowed. Your Majesty. No. Era took her hand. To you, I am always just Era. Will you accept the position of First Ambassador of the Alliance? We need someone who understands both our peoples. Through her earpiece, Do-1 whispered. Say yes. The council already approved it. Hansol smiled. I would be honored. Era turned to address the hall. Let this be our first act as an alliance. No more empire, no more subjects, only partners and friends. She raised her hands. The floating crystals changed color, painting the room in Earth's blues and greens mixed with imperial purples. Together, she announced, we will build something new, something better than any one world could create alone. The celebrations lasted for days. Ships from 50 worlds danced in space. Earth's cities lit up with imperial colors. Imperial worlds played Earth music in their streets. One quiet evening, Hansol found Era on a palace balcony, watching the stars, thinking deep thoughts. Hansol asked, "Remembering?" Era replied, "That first day when you came to my ship, I thought humans were weak, simple creatures." She laughed softly. "I never expected such courage, such wisdom." "That's the beauty of the universe," Hansol said. "There's always something new to learn, if we're brave enough to look." Mother asked me today if I knew this would happen, if I planned it all from the start. "And what did you tell her?" Era smiled. "I told her no one could plan this. We just did what we believed was right, and trusted each other to do the same." Below them, the city glowed with mixed lights from 2 civilizations. Ships from a dozen worlds moved through the sky. Children from different species played in the palace gardens. "It's beautiful," Hansol said. "It's just the beginning," Era replied. "We have so much more to build together." Hansol looked at her friend, remembering that first meeting when Era had been a proud princess and Hansol just a simple diplomat. They had both changed, grown, become better. Through her earpiece, Du-1 spoke softly. "The council wants to know if you'll miss Earth." Hansol smiled, looking at the mixed crowd below, the ships above, and her friend beside her. She knew her answer. Earth wasn't far away anymore. In this new alliance, all worlds were close, all people connected. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. And it had all started because one human diplomat and one alien princess were brave enough to trust each other. "What's next?" Hansol asked. Era's eyes sparkled. "Everything."